Hi there, I'm Rose, and in time for the upcoming release of the live-action How to Train Your Dragon movie, I thought I'd do a book versus movie on the original How to Train Your Dragon, and compare that book to the original film. For those of you who don't know, the movie was based on a series of books by Cressida Cowell, published between 2003 and 2015. If you haven't run into this series, you're not alone. I was new to them as well. I've seen the movies. I think I saw all of them in the theater. So I was really curious what the books were going to be like. What was all this grand Nordic drama like originally? Well, the answer turns out to be different. And in the case of Toothless, a whole lot smaller. The book starts out on a small scale, but then the scope gradually expands over the series. The books are different. Not bad different, just different. Like, if you've ever had a British Smartie and thought, whoa, it's like an M&M, but different. Like that. So take your movie expectations and shrink them down a bit. Dragon spoilers. The book begins with dragons, but these are not giant dragons like you're used to. They are small hunting dragons, only a few feet long, and are caught and trained by the young boys of Berk. The book begins with the boys on their way to capturing their first hunting dragon as a rite of passage. The boys are lined up on the shore at the bottom of a cliff where the dragons are hibernating for the winter. Their task is to each go into the dragon cave and fetch a young dragon to bring it back to their village and train. In this group of boys is Hiccup, the scrawny 10-year-old son of the village chief, and his friend, the even scrawnier and more clumsy Fishlegs. The other boys of the village are big, strong, strapping lads, ready to go and grab their dragons. Hiccup, who has been studying dragons, thinks it's insane to go into a cave of sleeping dragons, but he does it anyway. Things go well initially, until Fishlegs sneezes while trying to pick up a dragon, which wakes up the entire cave, all of whom try to attack the boys at once. They run for it, and at the entrance, Fishlegs panics because he doesn't have a dragon, and coming back without a dragon means exile from their tribe, so Hiccup gives him his. When Fishlegs says that now Hiccup doesn't have a dragon, Hiccup runs back in and grabs one he saw in a nook by the entrance. They both leave the cave and dive out into the ocean below to escape the swooping dragons. They're all on their way back to the village, sodden and damp, when they stop to compare what dragons they nabbed from the sleeping horde. Hiccup's cousin Snotlout has taken a monstrous nightmare, a dragon normally reserved only for the son of a chief, and Dog's Breath had found a gronkle. Hiccup finally gets a chance to take a look at his own dragon, which is just a common green, but it's also really, really small. The other dragons are the size of dogs, but Hiccup's dragon is tiny, like a dachshund. And maybe worse, his dragon has no teeth, so everyone takes to calling him Toothless. The boys crack up, making fun of Hiccup and his miniature toothless dragon, but Hiccup is just happy he has a dragon at all, since it means he won't be exiled. He still has to train his dragon, as the second part of their initiation into the tribe is to display the skills of their dragons at the next Viking gathering. This proves to be difficult, as Toothless turns out to be stubborn and untrainable. Hiccup decides to ditch the standard training method of just yelling at the dragon in favor of talking to him, because Hiccup has secretly managed to learn the language of dragons, Dragonese. This doesn't really help, as it now means he can understand what Toothless is saying when he says he won't follow his commands. Hiccup is worried that he and Toothless will be exiled from the village if they fail the initiation, and finally tries bribing the dragon with the promise of good jokes after nothing else works, and this rouses the interest of the little dragon, who begins to begrudgingly acquiesce to Hiccup's commands. At the gathering, Hiccup thinks that Toothless might not let him down, until, in the middle of the display, Toothless insults one of the other dragons, which causes chaos as the dragons all end up fighting each other in a huge snarl. Technically, this means that all the boys have failed the initiation, as none of them could control their dragons. The boys are delayed from their exile by a huge storm that blows in. As they all take shelter from the storm, a wave deposits on their shores an enormous sea dragon, hundreds of feet long. The Vikings try to get the dragon to leave by yelling at it, since that's how they deal with dragons, but it doesn't work. Then Fishlegs tells the group that Hiccup can speak Dragonese, despite the fact that it is technically forbidden, and this gets him volunteered to try to go to talk to the dragon and ask what it wants. Hiccup goes down to the beach and asks the dragon if it comes in peace or in war, and the giant dragon, Green Death, says he comes in peace, but that he will eat everyone anyhow, and that is just the way of the world since he is bigger and stronger. Hiccup goes back into the village with the news, only to find that there is another dragon that has washed up on their shores, a giant purple dragon. Everyone is now looking to Hiccup for a plan, as he is the only one there who can speak Dragonese. He comes up with a plan, one that involves tricking the dragons into fighting each other. Hiccup instructs their hunting dragons to fly near and insult each dragon in the name of the other one. This plan works, and the two gigantic dragons end up fighting each other in a titanic match on the beach. At the end of the fight, the Vikings think both are dead, when the green one rears up again, looking for Hiccup and vowing revenge. Finding him, the green dragon picks up Hiccup and tosses him into his enormous mouth. Hiccup falls into the throat of the giant dragon, and his shirt is caught on a pike stuck in the wall, leaving Hiccup dangling in the dragon's throat. The whole village sees Hiccup tossed into the dragon's mouth like a piece of popcorn. Not normally a beast prone to heroics, Toothless does a very unselfish thing and flies into the nostril of the green dragon to irritate its nose. This causes the green dragon to sneeze, which blows out both Hiccup and Toothless. The green dragon is furious and threatens to blast them all with fire, but when he tries to, he blows up, since Hiccup had plugged the fire glands of the dragon with the horns on his helmet while he was stuck in his throat. Hiccup and Toothless are acclaimed as heroes, and the tribe welcomes back all the boys who had helped to save the village with Hiccup. There the book ends, and if you spent this whole time thinking, but Toothless is supposed to be this huge black night fury, what happened? Hey, I get it. If you're coming into the book from the movies, it's something of a shock to see Toothless as a cute little dragon who wouldn't frighten a squirrel. I myself was super confused. How did they get from this to the movie? I had initially only bought the first book in the series, but as I dug around, I found out that the movies had also borrowed a lot of details from later books in the series to use as material. So, in the later books, Hiccup does acquire a black riding dragon, a windwalker. Hiccup had taken pity on the dragon because the dragon had a limp from an earlier injury. Despite having first pick, Hiccup had taken the injured dragon by choice, and it turned into a fantastically fast and fiercely loyal mount for the boy. Likewise, Astrid was based, more or less, on the girl Kamikaze, a champion burglar from the later books who was a good friend of Hiccup's. But still, the movie is really different in tone and scope from the books, so let's talk about the movie. The 2010 movie by DreamWorks begins with a swarm of dragons attacking the village on the island of Berk. These dragons are big, some breathe fire, and they are intent on destroying the village. We're introduced to Hiccup as a scrawny 15-year-old disappointment of his father, Stoic, the chief of the village. Here, Hiccup is a bit of an engineer, who assists the blacksmith, Gobber. We're told right away that the highest achievement a Viking can reach is to kill a dragon. Hiccup desperately wants to prove himself, so he uses a mechanical sling to wound one of the most elusive and dangerous dragons, the Night Fury. He sees the dragon fall to the ground in the forest behind the village and goes the next day to locate the fallen dragon. He finds it. It's a gorgeous black beast with big green eyes, and it's still bound by the bolas that Hiccup had launched at it. Hiccup is going to take the opportunity to kill the dragon while it's still bound, thus finally proving himself to his father and his tribe, but he can't bring himself to do it. Instead, he cuts it free, and is somewhat surprised when it doesn't immediately attack him. Hiccup goes back to his village, where he is put into training with the other teenagers, and taught how to fight dragons. He returns to the clearing and sees that the Night Fury's tail fin has been damaged, so the dragon can't fly away. The Night Fury, who Hiccup has named Toothless due to his retractable teeth, doesn't seem intent on harming Hiccup, so he begins to befriend the dragon, feeding it and getting it to trust him. As he bonds with Toothless, he learns about dragons in general, and uses his newfound knowledge when he goes back to dragon fighting, and uses it to subdue the dragons instead. Hiccup devises a mechanical replacement for Toothless's broken fin, which allows Toothless to fly again, and Hiccup learns to ride on Toothless. Back in the village, Hiccup's crush Astrid suspects that Hiccup is up to something, and follows him one day back to the clearing, where she sees Toothless for herself. Her first instinct is to kill it, But Hiccup pulls her away and tells her that everything they know about dragons is wrong. She isn't convinced until he takes her for a flight on the back of the dragon, where she sees for herself that Toothless is amazing. Toothless is diverted while they're flying, and he takes them to the cave of a massive red dragon who has the power to compel other dragons to bring it food. This is the nest that Stoic, the chief, had been looking for, but Hiccup realizes that this dragon is far too big for the humans to overcome. Hiccup then goes to his final exam in dragon training, which is to kill a monstrous nightmare. He tries to subdue the dragon instead, but the nightmare gets spooked and attacks Hiccup. Toothless hears Hiccup's cry and races to his aid, only to get captured in the attempt. Stoic then realizes that his son has befriended the dragon, and he learns about the dragon's nest. Convinced that he can finally destroy the nest, now that they know its location, Stoic sets out with his horde, using the captured Toothless to point the way. They reach the island of the giant red dragon, but it blasts their ships and is in danger of killing them all, when Hiccup and the kids from the village fly in at the last minute on dragons they had commandeered, and Stoic frees Toothless, realizing now that Hiccup was right all along. Hiccup and Toothless get the red dragon to launch and take it on in an aerial battle. They finally defeat it by shooting lightning into its maw just as it's preparing to blast them with fire, and this blows up the dragon from the inside. Hiccup loses a leg escaping the explosion, but Toothless blocks the fire of the blast from hurting Hiccup. Hiccup wakes up in the village a few days later and finds the place changed. There are dragons in the village now, and they're cooperating and living together in peace with the humans. And a new era of dragons and humans working together has begun. This movie is brilliant. How to Train Your Dragon was composed with an artist's hand. There are a lot of scenes that have been wrought simply to be beautiful. Color is used everywhere, and nowhere to better effect than with Toothless and his giant green eyes. Toothless is gorgeous. He's black and sinuous, but still surprisingly tactile for an animated creature. He's cute while looking lethal. And his big green eyes and cat-like head are adorable. Everything about his design was done well. The music is also nearly perfect. The thrum when Hiccup first flies hits deep. John Powell's score really kind of hit it out of the park on this one. The score makes the whole movie better. It provides the foundation for the emotion in a lot of scenes in the film. The movie's a fable about the difficulty of learning to work with someone you think is your enemy. It turns the training of a dragon into a rebellious act of bravery. This is everything he was taught not to do. You kill dragons, you don't train them. It's maybe the bravest thing Hiccup does in the movie because it means breaking with everything he was taught. And that is good storytelling. I don't think the live-action version can surpass the animated one. From what I saw in the trailer, the colors are all going to be more muted as it's supposed to be real. And I don't know if the remake will be able to reach the heights the original film did. Don't get me wrong, I'm definitely going to go see this new movie on the biggest screen I can find, because there simply isn't a bigger movie coming out this summer. I'm really looking forward to it, and unlike all the Disney live-action remakes, DreamWorks looked like they're doing a faithful live-action adaptation of the movie, using most of the original script almost line for line, and holy cow, thank you for that. You've got a thing that worked well. Why mess with it? The original movie was gorgeous. Going back to the books by Cressida Cowell, on first glance, it seems like the movie was a really big change. It starts with this epic battle between the dragons and the Vikings, and Toothless has become black and deadly. It seemed like a big shift at first, but when I got down to thinking about it, I realized it's not really all that different. The first script DreamWorks made kept Toothless as a tiny green dragon, but they were worried the approach would lose the entire audience over the age of 10, so they started over, bringing in Dean DeBlois, who had done Lilo and Stitch for Disney, and he reworked the story into what it is here. In the movie, Toothless is essentially the Windwalker from the later books, injured but superbly fast and loyal to Hiccup. The giant red dragon blows up at the end, and it happens not that differently from how the green giant dragon blows up in the book. Hiccup is still a disappointment to his father at first, and is a scrawny kid with a good mind rather than a brawler. Yes, Tiny Toothless is gone, but his whole deal in the books was that he was stubborn. While he's cute and charming, and later does save the day several times, He's also kind of annoying. Yes, I said it. Toothless in the books is annoying. In the books, Toothless always kind of does whatever he wants. And while that can be cute, it's annoying. In the movie, Hiccup does actually train Toothless. He trains a dragon, where in the book, How to Train Your Dragon, Hiccup doesn't train his dragon. So in the most literal sense, the movie is more accurately about how to train your dragon. For book versus movie, it doesn't happen much, but in this case, the movie wins. It's not that the books are bad, they're actually pretty good, and I can honestly recommend the 5th book with the volcano as awesome. But the movie was a masterpiece. It's huge and grand and beautiful. And I'm looking forward to going to go see the live-action remake, because I'm kind of a sucker for dragons. Side notes. It might not be immediately apparent to anyone, but everything Cressida Cowell was talking about in the book with the training of small dragons came from the noble and ancient art of falconry. I picked up on this from the very beginning when the boys are standing next to a cliff to go get their dragons. To train a falcon, you need to take it as a young bird from its nest, and accustom it to you while it's still very young. Most of the falcons and eagles nest in crags on the side of cliffs, so getting a young falcon involves precariously climbing or dangling on the side of a cliff to grab a young hawk or eagle. After that, it's a matter of very patiently getting it to sit on your outstretched arm until it's comfortable enough to fall asleep there. That thing Hiccup does in the movie where he looks away, that's real. Hawks don't like being looked at, so you don't look straight at them while you're training. Hunting birds are never completely tame, they're always somewhat wild, and the falcon is released back out into the wild after a couple of years in service. As far as I know, nobody keeps a hunting bird permanently. But if you train them to hunt for you, a good hunting bird will efficiently kill game for your dinner. And above that, it was considered a joy to train them and watch them fly. The hawks and falcons are some of the finest predators alive, and working with one used to be considered an honor reserved for nobility. In ancient times, when falconry was more common, there were strict rules about who could have what kinds of birds. Only an emperor could have an eagle, an earl could have a peregrine, and on down through the classes. In addition to the kennels for dogs, castles used to have mews for falcons. How do I know about any of this? Mostly thanks to reading The Goshawk by T.H. White. The book is White's beautifully written tribute to his first attempt at training a goshawk. His attempt failed, but he describes the whole thing in beautiful detail in a really great book. So when the boys were training their dragons to launch from their upthrust fist and to come at a command, I recognized the whole lot as having been derived from falconry. Cowell's hunting dragons are very much a stand-in for hawks. If you want to see what this actually looks like, there was a great documentary a few years ago called The Eagle Huntress, about a girl in the steppes of Mongolia who takes up the hereditary sport of training a golden eagle when her brother isn't interested. The documentary follows her as she goes out to the mountains to find her eaglet, and trains it and then competes in a competition with the other hunters. Unlike Hiccup, she does train her eagle and becomes a passionate supporter of the ancient sport. And if you like smaller dragons and you've graduated to longer novels, I would recommend the book Dragon Song by Anne McCaffrey. Dragon Song has a group of smaller dragons called fire lizards, and I had to stop myself from calling the dragons in Cowell's book Fire Lizards by mistake because they kept reminding me so much of McCaffrey's Fire Lizards. And if you like the riding dragons and How to Train Your Dragon and want to read what is maybe the definitive fantasy series with dragon riders, check out any of the other Pern books by Anne McCaffrey. I've read a lot of McCaffrey's Pern books. They're kind of my go-to comfort food for books, and I don't seem to ever run out. Whenever I need a pick-me-up, I can always seem to find another Dragon Rider book that I haven't read yet. But my favorite still remains Dragon Song with Menelie and her fire lizards. So if you need more small dragons in your life, check it out. Thanks for listening, everyone. This is Rose with Rose Colored Movies.